All right. Good day, class. J15, Environmental Science. So I will continue our coverage for the second examination. So I will share the screen to you. Our topic for the J15 Lesson 5. So here we go. So for the next topics, we are done in the identifying the major environmental factors that determine the kind of community that develops in an area. So on this point, we will discuss the human, excuse me, and the human ecology and the succession. So, what is human ecology? So, when we say human ecology, it is an interdisciplinary. In the usual sense, it's neither ordinary biological ecology nor a human ecology as a discipline. So, another branch of the biology or the study of life. Both have to rely extensively on other disciplines relevant to understanding the organism's behavior. So the multidisciplinary ecological and the human ecological applications emerge because the species behavior is so complex. So as we all know, humans are one of the higher form of animals. So it requires our knowledge of the human psychology or the study of the mind, human mind, and the behavior. And also, the human biology will often be important to understand how the individuals tick. So, as we all know, the human species has evolving when it comes to our human mind or psychology. So just like for example, our mental health. So as what I am experiencing on this pandemic, we are very anxious of what was happening or what is happening in our um, present day, and some of us could also be depressed, diba? Because of that, we humans are really evolving when it comes to our mental health. Another one is the ecological succession is the process of transformation of an ecological community's species structure over time. So the time scale may be decades, so that is 10 years, one decade, after a wildfire, for example, or even millions of years after this mass extensions. As you can see in this picture, for example, this forest experience wildfires, for example, just what happened in Australia, in the Amazon forest, in the Brazil, in the California, in USA. So this wildfire, it takes a millions of years to build or to grow these plants, di ba? So yun siya. So matagal pa or kailangan pa ng maraming panahon or time na tutubo yung mga plants or trees in the forest. And then as you can see here in the picture as humans is the most higher order thinking form of animals, unlike those lower form of animals, di ba, mga mammals, like the dog or cats or dolphins, di ba? Though they are intelligent, but kita na mga tao is kita yung mas may pinakamataas na intelligence quotient. So another one is that human ecology is the mutual relationship between the man and his environment. So it is influenced by the biologist research on the interaction of the species within their societies. The social scientists pursued likewise to study the human communities. However, in the social science, unlike the natural science, this biology, therefore, ecology is a study of how the social system adapts to the nature of the natural resources in the life of other human beings. It views the biological, the economic, cultural, and our present day, the modern world, the technological conditions or any individual's life as an interrelated set of shape and the functional determinants in the human cultures and the social structures. It also acknowledges that group action depends on the resources and the stated skills together build on the social network. So when you say social networks, it focuses more on the present day, the modern world, the 21st century time, di ba? So, as what I have mentioned, watched last week in Netflix, this documentary, The Social Dilemma. So if you would happen to watch this documentary film, so Dilemma um, discusses about this present day or this modern world in which as humans we are more engaging on this technology, the social media, the Facebook, the Twitter and Instagram, and then there's some instances that on our mind we are more paying attention on the social media, like for example we are posting or uploading a picture, diba? So there would say that time to time I would check if how many likes or how many heart react on that picture, diba? We are very um attentive on that part, or there are some cases sino yung mga nagko-comment, di ba? Or sino yung mga bashers, di ba? There would say that we could be down or ma-depress tayo kasi di tayo perfect sa ating picture. So may nag-comment doon na you have very flat nose or very big eyes, di ba? We should embrace our uniqueness or our true identity. So with that, this um, mental health issues in the social media or this technological advancement in the present time, so it is also basis on the humans as well. As humans, di ba? That is why I am now, as what I have experiencing on the social media, so I limit my time because it kills my time just scrolling in the news feed, di ba? Kaysa sa nagbabasa ako or nag-study for my lessons, so yun siya. Then we have here the population ecology. So the word population, so the entire organism itself. So it is a study of the processes which affect the distribution and abundance of the population of these animals, such as this rabbit in the picture. They are uh, having this overpopulation of their size or their species, and this plants such as this corn or this maize. So when we see population, that is a group of individuals of one species that occupies a given geographical region. So they are on the same location or this geographical region, and it interbreeds in the species that reproduce sexually. So it cannot be called a population if they cannot reproduce sexually. So sex is very important to save a species, di ba? Just like for example, this rabbit, so if there is a female rabbit and a male rabbit, they have this sexual intercourse, so they will produce it to another offspring. In some animals, the geographical borders of population are easy to define, but more difficult for others. So, for instance, occupying plants or animals have a geographic range specified by the perimeter of the island. In comparison, the certain species are scattered over a large expanses, so it is more difficult to establish the limits of this local population. A spectrum exists from close populations geographically separated from other populations of the same species and missing contact with them to open a population exhibiting a varying degrees of the connectedness. Even this population should have this same species to reproduce. Diba? So hindi naman siya pwede na ang rabbit is makipag-sex siya sa horse, diba? They don't have the same DNA. Like for another example is here, a herd of a common wild beast or Conocatus taurinus. I'm sorry, it should be italicized. They are migrating across a dusty savanna in the Africa. The animal is a keystone species, that is a species with a disproportionately large effect on its biological community. It paints in the Acacia savanna ecosystem from the southeastern Africa in the central Kenya. So this wild beast rather is migrating across the entire savanna to reproduce their own kind. So this is another keystone species that they are proportionately have a large effect on its biological community, because there are some would animals that would prey them, or yung mga predator, di ba, mga lions, so kinakain sila, so they will need to reproduce. Next, populations are groups of the same species organisms which live simultaneously in the same area. They are defined in terms of features which include the population size, which is the population number of the inhabitants. So when you say size, that is the number of that species. Next is the population density, is how many inhabitants in a given location. So, ilan yung mga species na nakatira dyan sa specific na lugar. That is the population density. The next, the third one is the population growth. That is how the population's size changes over time. So population growth. So how does this species um reproduce sexually from time to time, 'di ba? So in the past, we are not this overpopulated person, and then as time goes by, on the present day, so because of this pandemic, so there is a study that this pandemic is a result of this overpopulated human species. So that's why this pandemic is here, because of this disease, or he is here because of this overpopulated human species. And then the demographics, it provides the important information on the individual, such as the birth dates, the death rates, and where they live, as well as the overall size of the population. So that is the study of the demographics. So for example, modern human evolved in the Africa about 200,000 years ago. So they spread, or they overpopulated. They reproduce an offspring, and then about 100,000 years ago, so what would happen is that we began to migrating across any other location. And also we have here, so for example, in 2000, a normal population is here, 1 billion pa lang tayo in 1800s, the 1900s is we are how many billion? 1.7 world population, then 6.1 billion, and then until 2000, and then more population na naman until 2100. So United Nations projection of 7.7 billion in the 2018. That is merely an estimate. Also in this era of the informatics and the digital communication, the counting the number of people in the world is an inexact science. Some countries have never even censused, and those that have been done might not be accurate. So di pa siya sure if ilan talaga tayo nandito na sa Earth. So the governments exaggerate or understate their populations to make their nations look bigger or smaller and more prosperous than they actually are. So many people may not want to counted or cold, particularly if they are homeless, refugees, or illegal migrants. So there are some issues, diba, about the RH bill, or the reproductive health bill by the government, that in every schools, or yeah, in middle schools or in high school, that the DepEd or Department of Education could give a free contraceptive like the condom, because diba, as on that age is teenagers or youth are engaging more on premarital sex. So to prevent the birth rate of that teenager, so he or she should be responsible or educated to not engaging on that part. Because of this technologies, diba, informatics and digital communication, um, some are strangers na sa social media lang nila nakilala, or there are some mga pornographic mga videos or sites. So parang tinetest lang din siya yung mga utak ng isang mga bata. So yun siya. Then we exist in two cultural universe which are very different. One such world is small, young, and fast growing, while the other is wealthy, aging, and population shrinking. So kita is nabilang naman tayo sa developing countries. So mostly we are a small country. We are young, but they're fast growing. Well, yung iba na mga countries, like for example, sa USA, di ba, and China, even though they are overpopulated countries, they also engaging or they are also wealthy, di ba, or rich on their technological or their economy. So the world's poorest is inhabited by the overwhelming majority of the people living in the least developed countries of the Africa, Asia, and the Latin America. So as you can see here on this picture or this GIF, so as year rises, also so the teens noon is mostly ngayon is marami na yung mga 20s, di ba? Because teenager pa lang is they got pregnant, 'di ba? Teenage pregnancy, yun siya. So these countries, so yung Africa, Asia, and the North, Latin America, so yun siya, accounts for 80% of the world, but will contribute more than 90% of all the projected future growth. So the wealthier region includes the North America, the Western Europe, the Japan in the Asia, Australia, and the New Zealand. The average age in the richer countries is 40 years old, and the life expectancy of their residents can surpass 90 by 2050. So, with many couples opting to have either one or no children, the populations of those countries are expected to decrease in the coming century. Because ito siya na mga countries is they are developed na mga countries, di ba? And then they're also less population. And even though, yes, may iba naman sa kanila na nanganak or yung mga namamatay, yung nanganak sa is uh, they, they are also planning to have their own family if they are stable na sa kanilang jobs, if may trabaho na sila, if they are really ready na, and then makasurpass na sila or pagtatanda na sila is tatagal sila na maninirahan sa kanilang bansa kasi yung mga medical facilities nila is they are well developed. So these rich countries is really improving even though they are rising on their population, pero konti lang din ang kanilang population. So many developing countries, world countries, are growing so quickly that they will be reaching large population levels by the middle of this 21st century. So for example, the China, they are the most densely populated nation in the 20th century. Next is the India, expected to surpass China in the 21st century. Then is Nigeria from Africa, which had just 33 million in the 1950s, estimated to have 299 million inhabitants by the year 2050. Ethiopia, again from Africa, expected to expand nearly tenfold over the course of the century from about 18 million inhabitants 50 years ago. And then for many of those nations, so there is a rapid population growth, poses enormous challenges for our food security and stability, di ba? So unlike here in the Philippines, so we are a total of 104 million or 105 million Filipinos na tayo nandito sa ating bansa. And then, hindi pa din masyado updated yung mga, yung economy natin, di ba? So, we are experiencing this poverty. And then, nag-i-increase pa yung population natin. So, there is a lot of problem on this current situation that we are facing, this COVID-19 pandemic, di ba? So, ito siyang result of this overpopulated human species. So as you can see here in this picture is the exponential versus the logistic population growth. So as time passes by, so our population sizes are increasing. And then if there is a carrying capacity of the environment, so the more human species are evolving or we are overpopulated, so our use of the environment will also be deteriorating because yun siya, marami na tayo nandito sa mundo, so yung tinitirhan natin is parang magdi-decrease na din siya. So practically, all the populations would continue to grow exponentially as long as the resources are there or are available. So the most populations have the potential to expand at an exponential rate as the reproduction is generally a process of this multiplication. So the dami na naman tayo. So the birth rate and the death rate are two of the most important variables impacting the rate of the population growth. So the intrinsic rate of the increase in the is the birth rate subtracted by the death rate. So the current capacity now, so the population growth exponential versus the logistic growth. So yun siya. There should be an intrinsic rate or increase of the birth rate minus the death rate. So ang symbol pala ng carrying capacity is capital letter K. And then this populations expand at an exponential pace within an optimal world, one that has no limiting factors. It could also affect our environment of this overpopulated overpopulation. Next, we have here the ecological succession, the study of how biological populations reconstitute themselves appears as a result of the natural or the anthropogenic disruption was an ecological structure and theoretical framework underpin several disciplinary dimensions. So for example, this wildfire experienced by this forest, so it takes a lot of years or thousands of years, millions of years to grow, to have this plants and trees grow that. So as you can see here from this rock, and then will start to produce these lichens or this moss, so yung mga lumot, then grasses, then low shrubs, low tree, and then a high tree or another rainforest would be growing. So there are two types of ecological succession. First is the primary, the natural removal of the nutrients from the soil and the vegetations or the plants. It takes a very long time to recover our primary successions, and this may be attributed to the movement of the lava or the glaciers in retreat. The second one is the secondary succession, in which when the field and the trees are cleared, but the soil still persists. Example of this include the forest fires, or those wildfires that happens in the Amazon forest or in the Australia. Some are the deforestation, so yung cutting down of trees by us humans, and then some earthquakes, di ba? So this secondary succession relative to the main succession happens relatively rapidly. And this succession in the taiga came after in the 1992 Canadian forest. So that's a wrap for our um, lesson 5 discussion. So hope you learned something and thank you and have a good day. So bye guys.